We're going to jump in here and look around in some live software, which I'll drive you through. And the first thing that we're going to look at is figuring out where your AutoCAD assets are located. We'll do that with the options command. And then we'll go over to BricsCAD and take a look at our version of the options command, which is called settings. And we'll see what types of folders we find, and we'll go ahead and make a setup in BricsCAD to utilize the same type of folder structure. So let's go ahead and go to a demo here. And the first thing I'll do is show you AutoCAD. So here we are, and I will use the options command. Now, this interface is tabular, so you kind of have to know what it is you're looking for and where to go find it. But for the most part, I'm looking in the Files tab, and I'm looking at the support file search path, because that tends to be where everything gets initialized from and where Lisp routines are loaded from, etc. So we can see here immediately that this client has set up a network Z drive, and they have an AutoCAD support folder, and that seems to be where everything is coming from. So let's have a look at that. Here we go. And we see that sure enough, there's support there now. Look though, there's a Lisp folder, there's a Lisp backup folder, there's an extra backup folder, there's backups of the supports. This is the example of what I meant when I said clean house, please. Get rid of the additional folders and things. So when we migrate over, I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff. Now, I've taken the liberty of doing this and creating a BricsCAD folder already with a support directory in it. And I've copied over the files that I found in AutoCAD there. There's some Lisp utilities, a PGP, some CUI files, etc. So I've gone ahead and done this for you. Let's go ahead and look in BricsCAD and see how we can get things set up. Now, if you type in options in BricsCAD, we're going to take you into settings. So we actually perform a command alias, and that takes you in, so you can type options, you can type OP, whatever you're used to typing, work the same way here. Immediately we notice that settings does not look like options. It's not a tabular graphical interface, it is an indented hierarchical structure that is searchable. So if I want to look at something like the support file search path, I just key that in here, support file search path. But you have to spell it correctly. There, support file search path. Here it is. And we're going to have to add that Z drive, BricsCAD, support, like so. Now I will push it to the top of the list using the arrow controls, and this should seem very familiar if you've used the options control in AutoCAD. Then I will simply say OK, and we see that this has been added. So now we're going to start loading in files automatically. Now, one more thing though, on it just as a little show and tell example, somebody here has changed the background color for the model space tab, which drives me nuts. So let's see whether we can go find that. I'm going to type in background color. Now we see that there's a few places, like there's a hatch background color. No, that's not what I want. There's a shading background color, not what I want. There's a text fill color, not what I want. Background color, here it is. Now, notice something. As soon as I click away from here, see how that variable has been reset to a different color. This is something that is really slick in this dialog box. Anytime I see something that has changed color like this, it means the user has manipulated this setting. So this tells me exactly where the user has been in and what they've done. They've changed it away from the default color of black. So I can put it back the way I found it. But that's an excellent asset for debugging user machines. So a little bit of a guided tour into support there. So now that we have created a support folder we're going to take a look at some of the Lisp files that we found in there and get that correctly configured. So we're going to have to do some renaming, maybe a little bit of cleaning and a titch of editing. So I'm going to show you how that works. Now there are some key file names that are worth noting here, like AutoCAD PGP becomes default PGP. Our default CUI is called default. AutoCAD LSP becomes on start. AutoCAD doc LSP becomes on doc load. Why did we do this? Well, we don't want two files with totally different functionalities with the same name. We don't ever want the BricsCAD files to get confused with your AutoCAD files. And the AutoCAD LSP and AutoCAD doc LSP had a virus, kind of an interesting virus behavior several years back, where those files could be automatically replicated. And by renaming away from that standard, we not only get no file collisions, but we sidestep that problem as well. So some of the reasons why we have a few default file names. So when we migrate the Lisp, we're going to have to do a rename. I want to show you how you can load and look and examine your code. And all we have to do is really restart BricsCAD just to verify. Some of the watchouts: pathing. If you have something in your program that's an AutoCAD specific folder, well, someday AutoCAD is not going to be there. So if you leave that AutoCAD path in the file, you're going to have problems because it's going to be looking for a folder that's not there. So we'd like to look for those types of things and change them over to our BricsCAD folder. Let's see how that's done. So we'll go over to BricsCAD, just be a live demo here. And remember how we set up the settings folder. That was the Z drive BricsCAD settings. Well, how would we load in Lisp code from there? Well, the first way we could do it is we could do app load. And this command also exists in AutoCAD. So it's real straightforward. You just do an add, you navigate into the folder where you want to find things like a Lisp folder, and you can load the file just like this. You can load it into memory this way. And if you want it to automatically load every time you start BricsCAD, you click auto load. And this column is very much like the startup suite in AutoCAD. So equivalent functionality here. I'll go ahead and close that. You can also use Blade. Now this is like VLIDE. And this allows you to actually use a development environment, which includes a programmer's editor you see here. Parenthesis matching, automatic function matching. This is powerful, really is. And it also allows you to perform operations like compiles, embed DCL code, and make bundled solutions. So if you're a developer, if you do custom work at all, you will probably spend some time in Blade. So I wanted to make sure that we saw that. Now, another way, of course, that you can manipulate Lisp and have it load is by doing it from the automatic loading behavior, which in AutoCAD is AutoCAD LSP. But I told you that that needs to be renamed on underbar start. So I'll just rename it. Again, we're in the BricsCAD support folder here. So we renamed it on start. Let's open that in a text editor. And I slide it over from the other screen. So we see here, they're loading it from an AutoCAD specific path. That's not what we want. We want it to come from a BricsCAD path. Like so. Everything here looks good. And we do not want to say the AutoCAD LSP has loaded. We want to say on start has loaded. Save our changes. And that's it. The next time BricsCAD starts up, this will load in and run automatically. So that is a good example of how to approach or deal with migration of code. Another thing that we're very used to having in our environment, our AutoCAD environments typically, is tool palettes, because this is a very excellent way to deploy blocks. Users simply drag and drop from it. They don't need to know all the mechanics of what's going on. It's just easy to use. So my workflow here is I will export the palette from AutoCAD as an XTP file. I will keep those XTPs so that I can edit them or post-process them later if required. And then I will import those into BricsCAD. So what I'm going to do now is just walk you through that process. So into AutoCAD real quick. Let's dismiss this. And over here, we see our tool palettes. Now, in this particular case, the customer has one for fitness equipment. They use this to drag and drop fitness equipment to create a playground or something like that outside the building. Let's customize this. Customize palettes. Select the fitness palette. Right-click, export. We see that it will create a fitness.xtp. And I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of exporting that out into our BricsCAD folder just to save a little bit of time. So we will go over into BricsCAD and see how the import process works. So here we go into the palette window. We simply right-click, customize. We go into the palettes window, right-click, import. And I've got a palettes XTP folder right here where the fitness palette was exported, along with all of the bitmaps and things that are in this subfolder. So I'll simply click this and import it. And it comes, dismiss this box, and here's the fitness dialog, or tool palette rather. We can look at the properties of any one of the tools and see that everything we would expect, scale, rotation, auto explosion, everything that you would expect is still there. All the general controls are still there. And the hard-coded path for the file is shown here. So if you wanted to take these blocks that are being inserted from this palette and locate them to somewhere other than the C drive, you could certainly do so, but you would need to go edit the XTP file to change those paths. And then you could simply re-import the tool palette. So it's a pretty straightforward way to do it. That's why I use the XTP structure, because it's ASCII editable and I keep one per palette. So I do find this to be the ideal workflow. It's not the only way to do it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the best way to do it. CUI files. Here's where we've encountered things like ribbon tabs and drop-down menus and toolbars. And this is something that users depend on. It's part of their user interface. They expect it to be there. So how are we going to do this? Well, again, I have a recommended workflow here. What I do is I open the CUI file in AutoCAD. I find the custom elements, only the custom elements that we want to bring over, and I put those into their own CUI file, which I call custom only.CUI. I do this using the AutoCAD CUI commands transfer tab, and this allows me to bring over only the custom elements that I need into BricsCAD. Remember when I said migrate the minimum? So this is the best way to do that. Let me walk you through that workflow, and it will become apparent as I walk you through it. So into AutoCAD, CUI command. Here we see, by scrolling down into menus and toolbars, that we've got some custom elements here. And our mission, our goal, is to get that into BricsCAD. So I will use the transfer tab. This creates a brand new empty CUI file on the right-hand tab. Therefore, I can go here into menus and simply drag the custom menu into the menu group. I can go into the toolbars, grab the custom toolbar, and drag that into the toolbars group. If that's all I'm going to migrate, I'm done. All I need to do is save. Okay? And this will save to custom only.cuix. Now, again, I've taken the liberty of exporting this already to save some steps. So let's see how that works over on the BricsCAD side of the equation. Over here, we use the CUI command again, just the same. And we go here, File, load partial CUI. Here I have the custom only CUI that I built a moment ago in AutoCAD. So I will open it. Now this brings in the toolbar we see here and the pull down menu up top, which we'll be able to use once I dismiss the menu. So as you can see, it was smart enough to automatically paste it into your active workspaces. You can see that this was added into menus, this was added into toolbars, and you're getting an idea how our CUI dialog editor works. It's tabular rather than an indented long scrollable function. It's tabular. So it does look a little bit different, but it's very straightforward to use. If you can use the AutoCAD CUI editor, you can use this straight away. So I will say OK. And the worst thing that may happen is, and it did happen, is that your toolbars can sometimes go over onto screen 1 because I like to use screen 2, my big monitor for CAD. So I had to scoot it back over. But that's it. That's what's involved with migrating things over from CUIs. Let's look at migrating over the plotter configuration, and we can also talk a little bit about using the profile manager. We go to AutoCAD. AutoCAD has a command, as does BricsCAD, called plotter manager. And this brings up the active folder with all of your plot configurations. Now, one of them that I've built is my custom PDF plotter capture. This one right here. I want to take that into BricsCAD. So I'm simply going to do a direct copy and paste of this file. Remember, this is just a configuration file. This isn't a driver or anything proprietary. So there's no problem with copying this file over into BricsCAD. So right click, copy. Now we go into BricsCAD. We will execute the plotter manager command here. And this brings up our plotting window here. I will now simply paste. And that driver comes in. Now I don't want it to say custom AutoCAD PDF plotter capture. I want it to say custom BricsCAD PDF capture. Okay, there it is. And if we now plot from within BricsCAD, let's see whether it's there. And sure enough, it is. So that is just how difficult it is to bring your plotters over. And if you're like me, getting plotters configured correctly, it's kind of painful. So the fact that I never have to restart, I can simply copy and paste over, piece of cake. And the last piece of the equation is to use the profile manager like this. And this simply allows you to take all of the settings that we've been manipulating and create an external ARG file just like AutoCAD. And then you can use Profile Manager to import those settings on another machine. So just like you're used to, only the dialog box looks a little different. That's it. It's the most straightforward CAD program to administer and deploy that I've ever worked with, and I've been doing this 28 years. So let me wrap up by saying, it's really easy to replace your AutoCAD with BricsCAD.